This week's episode of Mooney's Mythic podcast is sponsored by herbs. That's right. We are lucky enough to be in the sponsorship of fresh herbs. Herbs that you put in your dinner, herbs in your creams and your potions, herbs that you drink in your tea, all around us, supporting us, nourishing us, cheering us on. This is the time of year that I like to go and pick elderflowers. And I used to, make lemonade and sorbets and all that kind of thing. But now I just dry them. I just pick them. I pick a few because I love the berries. I want to keep the flowers so that they berry. But I pick a few, I dry them, and then sometimes I make lemonade with them later. Sometimes I make tea with them. Just when I'm thinking, where has summer gone? And I make myself some elderflower tea, and summer arrives on my taste buds and deep inside me. And on my lips right now, I've got some calendula and rose cream from Wild Earth Apothecary. Just putting it, anointing myself with it, hoping that it makes everything a little bit sweeter that comes out of my mouth, or just sort of sweetens it on the way. And I'm thinking about the herbs that grow really close to me. I'm thinking about the great big clump of nettles outside my door, and how Culpeper said it was the plant that you could always find in the dark because of the way that it stung. And so we cut them down, and they're a nuisance, and they're a weed, and then they're dried and put in bags, and they're sold back to us in the supermarket. I mean, this reminds me of a real childhood confusion that I had, that we would keep our own feet really soft by taking the skin away from other animals, the hardened skin away from other animals, and wrapping our feet in it. That used to really confuse me. Or that we call this evolution, that we've lost our hair, we've lost our fur, we shave ourselves, and then we fill bags with feathers and cover ourselves with them, or cover ourselves with wool, the hair of another animal, to keep us warm. These are the things that kept me up at night when I was a kid. I wonder what herbs are growing close to you, because that's what I read somewhere, that the herbs you need are growing under your feet. So you might have yarrow or plantain. Just pick it. Just go out next time you're out. Just very close to your home. What's growing between the cracks in the pavement? What is growing up in between the grass? Great one for menopause, red clover. That's growing everywhere this time of year. Just going to have a little wee sip on my drink. Herbs. Now, I was driving along the other day, and I got to this place where it was early in the morning. It was like 8:30, and there was a woman with her dog, and it was quite tight going past her. So I slowed down. I had my window down already. So I was going past her. It was quite tight going down. And because my window was open, it got into that sort of proximity with the both of us where my social Tourette's kicked in, my kind of social blurting, and I had to say something. So I said to her, "This is where they drown the witches," because that's where we were. We were at Witch's Dip. And she looked at me and said, "What?" And I knew I should have changed course then, but I said, "This is where they drown the witches. This is where they brought them, and they drowned them, and they ducked them." And she said to me, "You've been smoking too much wacky backy." And there was something about that response which wasn't surprising for me. It's like there's something about talking about witches and the reality of the genocide of the witches in this country, which we're not quite aligned with. We haven't. This witches are seen as such a fantastical character, such an archetype, that we're not really acknowledging, I don't think, actually what happened during the burning and the witch trials in this country. But that is an autumn subject anyway, so I'm not going to talk about that Right now, that is an autumn subject. Thinking about feathers. I don't know if you've listened to an earlier episode, but I've been talking a bit about birds, about how they sound so amazing. I think I put it more poetically, but essentially, I am enjoying the sound of birds. I'm so enjoying the sound of birds, but not only that, I was about to sing the other day in a ceremony, and I got a bit nervous, as I do when I sing. I got a bit nervous and scared. I thought, oh, no, I'm not going to be able to sing. And I stretched out, you know, like when you expand your peripheral vision, I kind of did that with my ears. I like expanded behind me my peripheral sound, and I called to the birds. I was like, birds, will you please just help me? And before I knew it, I was singing. So I was really excited by this afterwards, and I said to my friend, hey, this is what happened. I called to the birds, they helped me sing. And isn't it amazing that you hear just layer upon layer upon layer of bird song in the morning? And you can't see any of them. You don't know who is making that noise. And maybe it's a tiny little bird making a really big sound. Maybe it's a really big bird making a really delicate sound. And he said to me, my friend Tom, he said that his girlfriend's got this app, and she can identify birds on this app. And I said, I don't really know about that, because I had a mushroom ID app, which I was really excited about. And I thought, I'm just going to test this mushroom ID app, because I'm not that confident with these sort of things. So I ran a photograph of myself, of my face, through it. And it said I was a giant puffball. And it didn't say probably or likely. It said definitely I was a giant puffball. I don't like that. Why didn't it just say, I'm not sure? People that aren't confident enough to say they're not sure, you can't ask them things. So I'm thinking about herbs. And I'm waiting for the lime flowers, because they come out. We used to go under lime trees if there was a dispute in the village or something really important to discuss. And lime flowers, they flower like for days, like 3 or 4 days maybe in a year. So I watch out for them. Some years I've missed them. But if I've got the time and the flowers are blossoming, I can go and get a blanket and put it under the tree, and maybe invite a friend, and we can just pick lime flowers for a few hours and chat. That's one of my happy summer places. So I've been away, and I wanted to just reassure you. That's me clinking against the old calendula pot. I wanted to reassure you all that I have not got pod fade. So I have been away for 2 weeks, and I've been on the moors, and I don't have any kind of, equipment to record podcasts. So I've just had to not do it. But I want to assure you that I have not got pod fade, because it's a thing, do a few podcasts, you're like excited about it, and then you're like, oh, I can't be bothered to do any more. That is not me, guys. I'm right here. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be recording weekly unless I'm out in a field. So that's what happened. I wasn't out in a field. I was out on Dartmoor. And I came back to the exciting and thrilling announcement that this podcast has had 1,000 downloads. I mean, that's just... Thank you. Thank you for everyone who's listening. Thank you for everyone who listened for a few minutes and just thought, meh, this is rubbish. That still counts. Thanks for everyone who put it on and then walked out the room, wasn't even listening. It still counts. And thank you to everyone who's telling me they're enjoying the podcasts. I so appreciate that. I really do. I really do. This morning, 2 friends were like, I'm loving your podcast. I'm loving this about it, and I'm loving that about it. And it's got me going. You know, I was thinking, oh, I'm not sure if I can record this podcast today. And then I'm like, yes, I can do it. I can do it for the people, for the nation. I can do it. So here I am doing it. And yeah, 1,000 downloads. And when I was unpacking from being away, I found this sort of bent sparkler. I must have it left over from something, and it's kind of bent at right angles. And I just thought, what I'm going to do to celebrate 1,000 downloads, I'm going to go out on my doorstep and I'm going to light this sparkler. I'm just going to have like a moment when I finish this podcast of lighting my sparkler. Just as this, in this moment, as I'm describing it, it's not feeling that celebratory. Suddenly, me standing on my doorstep with a bent sparkler by myself is not feeling it's not quite creating the picture of success that I was going for. Shall I do? Let's alchemize this in the moment. We can do this. I think that when I hit 5,000 downloads, which will happen at some point because I'm determined and I'm going to keep going. And even if my mum just keeps on listening and keeps on listening, at some point I will hit 5,000 downloads. I'm going to have a party. And I'm going to invite you all. Yeah, I'll have a theme, whatever is sponsoring the podcast. On the episode that I hit 5,000 downloads, I will have a party that is themed. Oh, I hope it's not a planet. I just hope it's not a planet and I don't have to do anything big and outer spacey. But apart from that, I think that's a pretty good thing to put out there. Yeah, I've been away. I've been on Dartmoor. Massive Dartmoor, and I hadn't really realised. I suppose I just go to that little bit of Dartmoor that I go to. I did do 10 tours, but I got awfully lost at school. I think I only did 3 or 4. But it was very, very beautiful to be out there, and I'm really, really looking forward to being out there more as the summer continues. And there's been a lot of talk about the weather, and I've decided to just get over the weather and just get outside, just to really keep on getting outside, because sleeping on the earth and being in the elements was so good for me. It made me feel so happy, so connected, so just me, you know. So I'm going to do that more, and I'm going to keep on getting more of the right clothes and be, you know, outdoorsy. I think that was used as an insult in our house when I was growing up. Someone was outdoorsy. I don't want that. I want to be outdoorsy. I want to normalise being outdoors for myself. That's my plan. But I was on Dartmoor for a special reason, because I was supporting a Vision Quest. Now, a Vision Quest is a ritual. It's a vigil where people go out on the land by themselves or in their very own space, and in this tradition they go out for 4 days and 4 nights with no food and no water. We have a beautiful ceremony at the beginning which lasts all night, and we sing and we pray, and it's so beautiful to be around a fire out on Dartmoor singing and praying in that way. It's a blessing. It's such a blessing. And then all the people that are questing get taken out to these little spots on the moors where they're totally by themselves. And they have little prayers that they've made. They've made tiny little bundles of prayers that they've tied on strings, which encloses them in their land, so they don't go outside of that space. And they stay there for 4 days and 4 nights. And during that 4 days and 4 nights, the support team keep the fire going from the ceremony through the night and through the day. And at dawn and at dusk, we go out onto the land somewhere where we know they can hear us, and we sing. It's a very beautiful thing, guys. It really is. But the moment where life just reached a technicolor exquisiteness for me was watching everyone walking back from their quest. They walked back after 4 days and 4 nights of no food and no water, 4 days and 4 nights of being held in the arms of the Moors with such dignity, beauty, splendour, grace, magnificence. Just watching them walking back filled me with, it's a moment I'll remember my whole life. And they filed back, and we gathered them around the fire, and we sang to them, and we sang great jubilant songs, and we sang tender sweet lullabies and songs that they would know and they could sing along to, and songs that they hadn't heard before. It was so beautiful, so life affirming, so wonderful. And I've done this prayer this way. I've experienced this myself. And when I did my first vision quest quite a while ago, 20 years ago, my teacher gave me a feather, a black feather for victory. She gave it to me. She looked me deep in the eyes and she said, "This is for victory." And I held it, and I had it with me in my spot for the 4 days and the 4 nights. And I thought a lot about feathers at that time, and I have been thinking about feathers and all the feathers I know. Someone gave me a feather once because I was going on a long journey, and they gave me a tiny little feather and said that it symbolised swift and safe travel. And I've got an ornament in my window with 3 goose feathers on it that kind of flutter in the wind that my friend made me, and she said it was for good dreams. I've been thinking about the colours of feathers, white for purity, and the feathers that have bright colours kind of spark the imagination and really sort of set something on fire, and the feathers that you just know, they're exotic, they're tropical feathers that can't be of this country of greys and greens. So I've been thinking about feathers. And that's where this story today comes from, is my deep thinking about feathers and my remembering of feathers and what they mean. So maybe it's time to tell a story. Once upon a time, there was a woman and a man, and they fell in love. Oh, the sweetness of their love, the fullness of their love. It was that kind of love that came together and created more and more and more and more and more, with its juicy ripeness, with its fertility, with its fecundity. It was a real summer love. And wasn't long before she was pregnant. Oh, so exciting. Actually quite daunting because she didn't know him that well. But she trusted the love, and she trusted what was happening with her body. And oh, and behold, she had a little boy. Oh, good baby. Ooh. And until she'd held that baby in her hands, she didn't know what love was. Until she'd held that baby close to her, she thought she knew what love was, but she did not know what love was. And she was so enraptured and enamoured and obsessed and daunted still by being a parent, but didn't have too long to think about it, because she found herself pregnant pretty quickly after that too. Oh, brilliant, a pair, it's great. Everyone loves to have a brother or a sister or a sibling to fight with and to love and to protect and all those things. And then there was the third, another boy, 3 boys. Oh, you'll have enough for a football team soon, they said. And when she had 4, they were like, oh, yes, she's going for the whole team. Yes, a whole football team, she would say, frankly, just exhausted by the thought of it. But people said that once she'd had 4 children, after you have 5, they start to look after themselves. it's not true. Well, they kept themselves out of trouble. Oi, come back here. Oi, look, please, will you come back? Stop it. No, get your fingers out of that. No, come, you eat that. No, share. No, there's enough for everybody. Come along. It was a lot of work. And when the sixth boy came along, there was a flicker of disappointment in her eyes that had been there for a little while now, which the children had seen for a little while. Just before she embraced them, there was this flicker that they didn't know quite what it meant, but the safety in the room seemed to dial down. And then finally, the seventh baby arrived. It was a girl. It was a girl. It was a girl. But the saddest thing was that the mother was not alive long enough to know that. She faded away as that girl was born. No one really held that baby without heavy sadness in their heart. And the boys, well, they didn't have time for her at all. She was the little one that killed their mum. You can't play with us, you're a girl. You can't because you're a girl. No, you can't because you are a girl. And without a mother to hold them, and without a father to support them, because the father, he was out hunting in the woods. He was out, anything, rather spend time with the children that reminded him of the dear beloved woman that had died. Anything to get away from his life. He was out all the time, hunting deer, hunting stag, hunting the biggest, the greatest, hunting. Until one time when he was out hunting, he was blind with the bloodthirst of it, with the sniff of it, with the desire, with the driving of it. And then he noticed that he was completely and utterly lost in the woods. He didn't care at first. What did he care for getting lost? What did he care for home? But then he did feel weary, and there was a part of him that wanted to go back. And that was when he saw her, a woman standing by the tree. Normal enough, but was there something a little bit dead about the eyes? Was there something? But then manners kicked in and he said good day to you, and he asked her if she knew how he could get out of the woods, if she knew the way back to the village. And she said, yes, and I can tell you, but you'll marry my daughter, won't you? What did he care? What did he care for death or life or marriage? What did he care at all? So he agreed. And before he knew it, he was walking back to the village with a woman on his arm. Beautiful, yes. But did she not have the same dead look about her? The same smile that didn't quite reach the eyes? And he was worried, so he went to see the old, wise woman of the village. And she considered him for a moment. She sniffed about him. She said, you're right. I wouldn't leave my children in the vicinity of this woman. I don't think they're safe. And she gave him a magical ball of wool. Now, he wasn't really into this kind of thing, and he's like, no. And she said, look, this ball of wool will unravel and lead you to wherever you hide your children. This ball of wool is like a kind of magical sat-nav. Well, I could have done that when I was lost in the woods, he said. You weren't ready for it then. You're ready for it now. So she advised him to tuck his children away somewhere very safe and to only visit them by using this ball of wool, to put them somewhere where even he wouldn't be able to find his way back and forth without the wool. And so that's what he did. And he started to lead this kind of double life where he would have fun with his children, and then he would go back and he would live with his wife, who he was not getting to know any better bit by bit, but she was. She was noticing that he would disappear in the afternoons, and he would come back with this far-away look in his eye, that he would come back polite but hidden slightly, that he would come back distracted but happy. And she wanted all of him. She wanted all and every bit of him. So one day she followed him, and she saw that he'd hidden 7 children. She saw that when he was with them, he smiled and he laughed in a way that he didn't smile and laugh with her. And he saw him recognise his wife's look in all of the children. And she saw that he still loved her. And it touched such a bitter place, such a black and hungry place on the inside. And by the darkest dark moon, she started to stir a potion, and she pulled the herbs, the roots up from the ground, and she took the berries that were like blood, and she put the blood of a swan inside the potion, and she stirred it till it bubbled, and she stirred it till it was thick. And when he was sleeping, she stole that ball of wool, and she found her way into the woods. She rolled out that ball of wool, and there the cottage appeared, and she knocked on the door. I'm getting it. No, I'm getting it. I'm getting it. No, I'll get it. No, you are a girl. You stay back. You don't answer doors. And they pushed the girl back, and all 6 of the boys rushed to the door, and they opened the door. And there she was. And she had a crow's fan in one hand, and she threw the liquid over them, and pop, 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 pop. She flapped the wing of the crow, and she began to sing a song that curdled the blood inside of them. And immediately they began to transform, bones snapping, squawking, angular, moving, dancing, jumping, and before she knew it, in front of her there were, instead of 6 boys, 6 swans. And that really freaked her out, because she wasn't quite sure what the potion was going to do. And so she ran. She got right out of that place. And she never knew that she left a girl behind. She never knew that those 6 brothers had a girl that was hidden. And so the swans, they flapped and they moved around, and they flew around the cottage, up and down and around, squawking and fighting fiercely. And then at midnight, they began to rub each other and twitch in a different way. And the girl watched as her brothers reappeared again. And they looked at her, and they hugged her, and they hugged each other, and they said, "Sister, we're just like this for a short time. It seems that the spell breaks for a short time every day. What can I do?" she said. "What can I do?" "You can't do anything. You're a girl." "What can I do?" she said. "What can I do?" And they looked down, and they said, "Well, there is a way, but it's long, and we don't want to ask it of you, and we don't think it's possible, really." "What is it?" she said. And they told her that there was a way that the spell could be broken. They told her that if someone were to gather nettles by the full moon, and to weave and spin and sew them into tunics, if they did this work of pain, of patience, of diligence over 6 years, and they made 6 tunics by the end of the 6 years, the first dawn of the end of those 6 years, when it rose in the sky, if each of those swans was wearing their tunic, then they would be transformed back into boys again. But during all of the making, during all of the time of the making, the person making them must not speak a word. And nor did she. Quietly, she went out when the moon was full, and she gathered nettles, the herb that you could feel in the dark, And yes, it stung her skin, but it made her feel powerful. It made her able to go on more. It gave her fortitude, and she kept on going, weaving and spinning and sewing the nettles, and sometimes it blistered her arms, but on the inside it made her feel so good, and she got used to it. She got used to the feeling. It was like life force in her hands. And she weaved and she span and she sewed. And the moons, they came and went. And into the 3rd year, when she had just spent 15 minutes a day with her brothers and no more time with anyone else, a king saw her in the woods. And he asked her questions about her work, and she didn't respond. But he could see that it was a deep work. He could see that somehow she was tuning into something beyond any realms that he could understand, and he wanted to protect that work. So he said that she could have a space in the castle where she would be under his protection, where she could carry on her good work, and he could see it was good work, and she'll be undisturbed, and she'll be fed, and she'll be nourished, and she agreed. But the king had a mother who was never queen. The king had a mother who had never been queen. And tight she was on the inside. Dry she was, in a place that needed moisture. Tense she was, in a place that could have been soft. And when the king brought this girl home, she didn't like it. And so she questioned her about what she was doing and why she was doing it, and the girl didn't speak at all. And it was so frustrating for her. She hated it. She wasn't used to this insolence. She began to spy on the girl. This girl that smelt of feathers and carried on her work in quiet, and she saw that she gathered nettles, aren't they a weed, by the full moon. And she saw that every now and again a white feather would fall around her. And she said, look, this silence, this moon work, this weaving, this herb work, these feathers, it's witchcraft. It's all witchcraft. And when the king was away, she began to build the fire, and she called witch, 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 witch. And she dragged the girl out, and she said, I am going to burn you at this stake unless you speak. And the girl didn't speak, and she gathered up and gathered up. She had all these bits of cloth around her, and she walked towards the fire with her head down. Just say something, say something. The queen, the woman who had never been queen, spat at her, but she didn't speak. She didn't speak as she walked. And that day was the morning of the 7th year. And as the sun began to rise, just in time, the boys circled, the swans circled around her, and she threw tunic after tunic after tunic after tunic after tunic after tunic. And they began to move and turn into boy after boy after boy after boy, shrieking. The woman who had never been queen, she was shrieking with the fear of it all. And the 6th boy, the tunic just caught on the fire. And so he still had one wing as he stood there. And she called to them, brothers, brothers, help, brothers. And they came and they held her and they pulled her from the fire. And each of them looked at each other, and they stood, and one at a time they jumped over that fire, and they jumped over that fire, and they jumped over that fire. And they said yes to a new chapter and a new chapter and a new chapter. And that is the story of the sister with the 6 swan brothers. And that story, there's different versions of that story in Grimm Tales, and there's different versions of that story in with Hans Christian Andersen. There's lots of different versions all over the world. You've got to be careful with Hans Christian Andersen because basically his stories are like manuals for behaviour. So if you behave yourself, this will happen. And if you don't behave yourself, that'll happen. So he's taken lots of old stories and he's adapted them to kind of get children to behave. Reminds me of when I used to tell my son stories in bed at night, and I would describe these wonderful characters, and then they would fall asleep, and then another character, and then they would fall asleep. But he soon cottoned onto that, and he was like, I don't want them all to fall asleep. But it's a good one if you want a kid to fall asleep, and you can say, and then the tiger relaxed his feet, and then the tiger yawned and thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a dream? But that's not what this story's about. I love this story. I think it's a really old story. I think it's got kind of lots of initiatory, rites of passage, echoes in it of some ways that we used to live and be that have been lost, that are not present at all within the story. But when I tell it, I can feel it in my body. I can feel it. The transformation, the work by the moon, the work with the nettles, the spinning, all of it, it evokes in me a memory of initiatory experiences, and so that's why I tell it. So for most of these podcasts, I have told a story. And I might not always, and I'm warming up to have a guest. What I'd really like to do, if I've got the spoons for it, is get Sarah Curtis on singing her new song, The Hedgehog Queen of Glastonbury. It's so good. It's so good. So maybe next week I'm going to tell a story about a hedgehog next week, because tonight we've got a hedgehog night at St Benedict's Hall in Glastonbury. There's me telling a hedgehog story, Sarah Curtis singing, and a guy called Paul Thompson. So it's going to be a really good night. Sarah Curtis has made a load of cakes. So if you're about in Glastonbury tonight, come on down and yeah, have some good fun with us. And on Sunday, I'm going to be at the Scythe Fair telling stories pretty early at midday. So come and have some stories. If you tell me you've listened to the podcast, you can tell me what story you want to be told, and I'll tell it to you. How about that for an outlandish claim? There's something I'm supposed to say now. What am I supposed to say now? Oh yeah, liking and subscribing. I don't know if that's important really, but what I need from you guys is comments. If you can put some comments on my Substack or somewhere so that I can send them off to people, that would be really, really great to keep this podcast going. I'd be so grateful. I'm going to tell you another story next week, and then after that I've got a little something different for you. So that'll be the solstice. I think we should do something really special for the solstice, something much more special than bent sparklers. But for now, thank you so much for listening. Lots of love to you all, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Just praying that this podcast is good company for your heart and for your soul, that we can call back the village through listening to each other, through listening to stories, through really being in the world in a good way. Bless your hearts and bless your lives, and may this rising sap and continuing flourishing and blooming of the summer be experienced deep inside our bodies as well as on the outside of us. Mwah. Lots of love, my darlings. Bye-bye.